everybody. Very nice to see you. I'm going to talk a little bit today, before the film, about the natural storyteller. And having worked as a storyteller for about 35 years, I'm completely convinced that we are all natural storytellers. And it's a bit like, you know, with nature, that we have this innate thing which loves nature, and they've got a word for it now, biophilia, which sounds a bit like an illness or something, but it just means that scientists have proved that this exists, that we actually get happy when we meet nature, which we know anyway, but it's really nice to have a word for it, and scientists agree. And I think it's the same thing with storytelling. It's hardwired into us. But with both these things, with storytelling and with nature, it has to be triggered. You've got to go out into the forest, you've got to be beside the sea, you've got to feel the wind in your face to get that joy, to get to develop that love and that contact which is in you. And it's the same thing with storytelling. If nobody ever tells you a story, then you may never feel that part of yourself which is a storyteller and which loves stories. So, So, how do you get somebody to listen to a story? If you've got a group of kids or teenagers, it doesn't really make any difference. How do you get them to listen? You know, they've never heard stories, they're all on their smartphones, what's going on? Well, this is one way you might want to get them to listen to you. You might want to clap once and then get them to clap twice. Okay? Let's try it. And then the opposite. Now I'm going to say something and I'd like you to say and do the opposite. Up.
Down.
Down.
Up.
Out.
In.
Out. Left.
Right.
Right.
Left.
Left.
Right.
Heaven. Earth.
Heaven.
Mountains. Valleys.
Underground.
Peace.
War.
War.
Peace.
Peace.
War.
Hate.
Love.
Love.
Hate.
Love.
Hate.
Misery.
Joy.
Happiness.
Misery.
My childhood, in my mind, is divided like that into two opposites. I was born in London, and there in London I had very strict teachers. In fact, if you said a rude word, they took a scrubbing brush and soap and they scrubbed out your mouth. And if you cried, they put a plant in front of you so as not to waste the water. That's true. The teachers were strict, but the kids were stricter. You had to wear the right clothes from the right shop. Carnaby Street, kids in gear. And my mum sewed our clothes on the sewing machine, and you can imagine I did not have the right clothes. And my memories of that time is of fear and competition and anxiety. But my mum and dad took us out pretty much every weekend to my granny's cottage in the countryside, an oak cottage with a thatched roof, and there we played and we played and we played, and I felt connected to everything, and I did not feel frightened. I felt brave, and I felt like I had a part to play in this world. My mum used to tell us a lot of stories. She told us fairy tales, she told us folk tales, she told us stories from all over the world. And it was only much, much later that I realised that embedded in so many of these stories was an understanding of this balance with nature, this balance that we need to find in ourselves. Well, I grew up and became a storyteller, and in London at that time, if you were a storyteller and you were at a party and people said, "What do you do?" and you said, "Oh, I'm a storyteller," they'd look at you like you'd said, "Oh, actually I work as a professional goddess." Or like, "No, I'm a professional fairy." But actually, the kids did not react like that. It was as if they knew about this. It was as if as soon as they heard the story, yes, this is what we've been waiting for. We got lots of work. And in London at that time, very often after I told the story, children would run up afterwards and hug me. And the teachers, they would often say, this group, they can't listen. They've got no attention span at all. They're like 5 minutes, they watch television all the time. It wasn't true. And it's not true now either. I tell stories for thousands of kids, mainly teenagers in Norway, and there's never a child who does not want to listen to a story. And that's why I say, I think it's in us. I think it's actually inborn in us in some way that I don't understand. The thing is, a lot of people start to think, well, okay, you've got to be a professional storyteller. That is not true. Of course it's not true. It's like you don't have to be a professional lover. I don't have a lot of experience with professional lovers. I'm sure they're very good. But actually I would say that, the real thing will always be better. And so you've got to find a story that you love. That's really important. Because if you're telling a story that you don't really care about, then how will you find the way to tell it? You have to find a story that you love. And so Hawthorne Press invited me to find all the stories that I love, or most of them, 48 stories that I love about nature, and put them in the book so that it's a little bit easier for people to find them. And then, of course, you've got to practice the story. And in, I think it was 2008, I invited Princess Märtha Louise. She made this big storybook, and I invited her to the Storytelling Festival to tell stories, and she said, "I am so nervous." She said in Norwegian. She said, this is like all these professional stories. I'm not a professional storyteller, I just read aloud. Well, she told so beautifully, so much better than, when she read aloud, it was kind of a bit wooden and, not that good. But when she was telling spontaneously and listening to the audience with her body, it was beautiful. She did such a lovely job. And that is really the case, I think, with everybody. Once they find their own voice, they find their own way. They're not trying to copy somebody else. Find their own voice. They will tell the stories. These stories have not been written by somebody to make money. These stories have been made by our ancestors. Our ancestors wanted to pass on their wisdom, and they said, okay, people don't really like being told, do this, do that. No, let's give them a story which is a present, so then they can find out what message they would like through this. And that's what stories are. They're a present, they're not a dogma. So 20 years ago, I moved here to Norway. And pretty soon after I'd arrived, I heard about the Norwegian Pilgrims Way, and I thought, I'd love to go on that. I love walking. But I had 3 kids, I was selvnæringsdrivende, there was no chance I was going to do that. Until one day I got rung up by a priest. And he said, do you want to go on a pilgrim's way? It's a job, you can tell stories. I said, yes. And I told my kids about it that night. And my youngest daughter, she said, can I come? Well, at that time she'd been having problems. We found out afterwards she was actually being bullied at school. Didn't know that then, but it was like, I said, Mari, look, I mean, you don't even want to go out on a Sunday for half an hour. This is 250 kilometres with like Norwegian pensioners. Can you imagine how fast they walk? Just forget it. She said, please, Mum. So I said, all right, you can come if you promise me one thing, that you won't complain, not even once. If you do, you'll have to go back to Oslo. Do you think she managed?
Yes.
You're right. I'm glad to see that you know that. She managed, and at that time she had on her leg a kind of disgusting skin problem. It was all sort of white and red, and we tried different medicines, we tried creams, you know, we tried all kinds of stuff. When we came to Trondheim, it was gone. It didn't come back. But even a greater miracle was that she loved walking. And the next year we went with our other teenagers to Santiago de Compostela. We thought, teenagers, is this going to work? It worked fantastically. It was like being in Ringenes Herre. It was wonderful. And the year after that, she said to me, Mum, can I walk on a pilgrim's walk with my friends? She was 13 years old. I said, Mari, you're only 13 years old? No, please, please. Okay, they did. They walked from Hamar all the way to Trondheim. And they were carrying their baggage. You know, we had this pilgrim who was driving our baggage. And we had places to stay and everything. And they were living on porridge, you know. And they managed it. And on that walk, they told each other all the stories that they knew. And they came back shining. And the year after that, she said, Mum, can I walk by myself? Do you think I said yes or no? Actually, I said no. Oh, she was 14. Bloody hell. So then again, she asked me the year after that, no. 16, okay. So she did. She walked alone. And again, I was terrified, you know. I tried to convince her to bring this huge dog along with her, but she didn't want to do that. So she has become a medical herbalist, and I think it was very much influenced, especially that first walk. There was an old man called Jon who showed her all the tiny little alpine plants. So, yeah, at that time, I wanted to connect these two things of walking, which I feel is just so, you know, when you're walking along and everything is moving, isn't it, in you? Your left side, your right side, your connection with everything around you. And it's such a wonderful combination with a story. And the story can start to move around in you and understand. I wanted to connect those two things. It took a long time, but I think it was again 2008 that I convinced Stovner be there to allow us to make a pilgrim's walk for the kids. And that it's been going strong ever since. So this year there'll be, I don't know, certainly over 1,000 children walking at Stovner. And these kids are from not Norwegian backgrounds, you know, and some of them, they don't know about walking. They're wearing the wrong clothes, you know, it might be raining, we go whatever the weather. But they meet me on the way, and I'm dressed as a medieval pilgrim, and I'm praying, and I'm telling them, look, I'm a sinner. And for my sins, instead of being put into prison or burnt as a witch, I'm going to walk, and I've walked for 6 years to all the different destinations. And they're, wow! You know, and they're like, yeah, we're going to come with you. And in fact, do you want to share my lunch? And my mum, you can come and shower at my house. And, you know, and we're sharing stories. And then about halfway through, I say to them, okay, should it be easy to be a pilgrim? And some of them have never heard of a pilgrim before, but they know. They say, no, it shouldn't be easy. I say, yeah, you're right. And now you're going to take off your shoes. And they go, oh, take off our shoes? No. It's like asking them to be naked. It's like, no, my mum won't let me do that. But they do, usually. Most of them do. And as soon as they've taken off their shoes, it's like they're plugged in. They're connected to the land. And they don't want to put their shoes on again. And most of them, they're even all the way, some of the teachers force them to put the shoes back on again. But that physical, more than physical connection is there. So then, you know, blah, 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 I could go on forever. I've been making other pilgrims walks. I've made one down in Vestfold, where I'm in role as a British botanist, a wonderful woman called Marianne North. And there again, the kids, they're going out on an adventure, eventyr. I love that in Norwegian, it's the same word. We don't have that in English. Yeah, well, it's always difficult, because now I've been saying stuff to you, and you know, you're in the listening mode, but if there's anybody who's a bit curious about anything that I've said and would like to know more, then I think we've got like a few minutes where you could ask a question, or I'll be also coming along to the lunch, so dinner afterwards, so you could ask me then. Yes?
Is there a website where these pilgrim walks are to be found?
If you go into my website, georgiana.net, there is actually a beautiful half-hour video about that pilgrimage, and there are also other links to, there's a little video from Tønsberg. We do it down by where the Viking ships were buried. Yeah, so you'll find various things. And also, there are quite a lot of stories on YouTube, if you'd like to hear a story. I think the connection for me, perhaps, with the film that we're about to see, is that she also sensed that there was some knowledge that her ancestors had had, that suddenly she had lost, and so she went on a journey to try and find that, and it's really quite similar to the knowledge that is in these stories. So, yeah. Well, thanks so much for listening.